Hello, my name is Jennifer Maker, and I am here today to show you how to make an awesome paper shutter. Now, if you're not sure what I mean by a paper shutter, I'm going to show you. What you do is you can take an old wood shutter, just like this one, and you can turn it into something super awesome. This paper organizer storage thing is made from an old shutter. Isn't that cool? So let's go over the whole process of how to make this right now. So first, you need to get yourself an old wood shutter. So this shutter that I have here is about 15 inches wide by approximately 4 feet long. And this is pretty typical for a shutter, and this is what you want. Solid wood, right? It doesn't matter how old it is. This is not fancy wood. I think it's just pine. I found it in my local reuse center for $3. You might have some in your attic. You might have some on your house that you want to replace. You might be able to find them at a thrift store or an antique store. That's what you're looking for. You can buy them new, but you're not going to want to because they're expensive. What you don't want to do is get one from your local home improvement store in a box. The kind that come in a box that are reasonably priced. They look like this. So they look pretty good, huh, right? So the problem with these is that they are hollow on the other side. They're hollow, and not only that, but they're like plastic and super flimsy. There's like a crazy like plastic connector in here to keep it from falling apart, I'm sure. This will not work for our project. This kind of shutter is fine if you're just hanging on a wall for decorative purposes, like with some paper flowers or something. It will not work for a paper shutter, however. So do not make my mistake and get those thinking that you can do this. You need the old-fashioned wood shutters, right? This doesn't have to be high quality. Get it? I got this one. It was full of cobwebs and it's dirty. Cleaned it off. There were a couple slats that were falling off. Fixed them. It didn't take long. It was no big deal. Okay. So once you have a shutter and it's ready to go, also if you want to paint it, this is the time to paint it. Your next step is to prepare your material. So the way that this works, and let me show you so that you know what I'm talking about by material, is here's our shutter. Put it up here so you can see it better. Move this little box over here. Okay, so here we have the paper shutter. And you can see that the paper just slides right in here like this. It's really awesome. It's as if it was made for paper. And I have mine set up for 12 by 12 inch scrapbook paper. Because I like to use that for doing paper crafting, but you could do this for any size paper up to 12 inches. I think that doing it by the 12 by 12 size is more flexible because you can always resize it later on, and I'm going to show you a trick to how to do that. But basically, this is how it works. Here's the bottom so you can see it all the way. And if you look at the sides here, you'll see that there's the papers coming out here in the back, but it's not falling out because we have these handy little fabric pockets that we've made, which isn't anything too complicated at all. This is what I'm going to show you how to do today. And so you're going to be making these pockets so that you can create your own paper shutter. All right, so we need to prepare our material. Now you're going to want to get about 7 to 8 yards of material. Find it from your stash if you keep a fabric stash, because that's rather a lot of material. If you can't, you can find really inexpensive, just plain old whatever material. Chances are no one's ever going to see this unless you intend to show it to them. So don't worry about what it looks like. If you do buy material, it's helpful to get one with like a polka dot or a stripe pattern, just because it'll help you keep everything straight and just one less thing to worry about. That's why I have polka dots. So what we want to do is start by cutting our material into strips that are wide enough to cover our slats. So my slats are, let's measure, make sure I know, they're just about 12 inches. So we're going to make 12-inch wide strips, and about 7 to 8 yards will make just enough that we need. Now the way that I'm going to do it is I'm going to cheat. I don't really want to cut that much material, so we're going to actually just take it right off the roll here. You do not have to pre-wash this fabric. It's not going anywhere. This fabric I'm using here is 100% cotton quilting material. It was the cheapest stuff I could find. I used to keep on. I think I got it down to $2 or $3 a keep on. Okay. So there, our fabric is off the roll. Here's what I'm going to do. Make it really easy on myself and easy on you too. So I am just going to mark it, and I don't care about the fact that the selvage is showing. In fact, it'll just mean a little less unraveling. If you care, of course, you're welcome to cut that part off. So I'm going to mark where I want it to cut, where I want it to. So you could just use the ruler, or you can just use the slats themselves, which is what I'm going to do. And I'm going to make a tiny cut right there. And just in case no one's ever showed you this trick, you can thank me later. I actually did not know this trick until like well into adulthood. So as long as you're right on the grain, you can just do this. And it'll tear perfectly. I love doing this part. And the best thing about doing this, first of all, it's so much faster. But also, because it's ripping right on the grain of the fabric, you're not gonna have those weird little threads that like to unravel. You'll get long threads that you can simply pull right off, and then your edge looks nice and neat. It's awesome. So we're gonna do this twice so that we get 3 8-yard long strips. So there's one. We'll set that one over here. We're going to do it one more time to the other side of our fabric. And since I love to use selvages, selvage, by the way, is the edge of the fabric that's already got like a little binding. It's the way the way that it's woven. It's not going to unravel on you. So I love to use those. We're going to do the same thing. Cut right here where we want it to be, just like that, and then rip. Seriously, this is the funnest part of the project. You don't often get to rip 8 yards of fabric. All right, so there is our second set of 12-inch wide fabric. And for this, by the way, these are the long threads that you'll get, and you can just pull them and they'll just come right out. And then once you're done pulling out the long threads, you won't have any little bits. It's awesome. Okay, so this middle part, depending on the width of the fabric you get, will probably be not quite the right size. So we're going to do this to bring this down to 12 inches. So we just repeat the process one more time. Put a little cut here and rip. And the thing is that you can totally trust this, because it is the reason why it can rip like this is because it's right on the grain, right on the threads of the fabric. So it's perfectly straight. This is straighter than you're ever going to get cutting. Trust me. I mean, seriously, you want to do this project just so you can rip up a bunch of fabric, right? Don't you? All right, so we don't need this bit, this extra bit that's not 12 inches wide. We're going to just set this aside. And we're going to start with we'll start with this second one we did, because it's the nicest and neatest. Okay, so for step 3, you want to determine the depth of your fabric. Because we don't want to just stick this on here willy-nilly, because what would happen is our pockets would be too deep or too shallow for our paper, right? So we actually need to figure out what the right size for the kind of paper that we want. Now, as I mentioned, I am using 12 inch by 12 inch. This one's kind of wrinkly. Let's use the other side so it's not so wrinkly. You guys don't need to see a bunch of wrinkles. You need to see it nice and straight. Yes, you could iron this. That's a lot of stuff to iron. It's really not necessary. There we go. Okay, nice and straight. All right, so to determine the depth of your pockets, you can use an easy formula. Okay, so really all you have to do is take the length of your paper times 2 and subtract 1.5 inches. So for example, we want to do 12 inch by 12 inch paper, right? So this is 12, so 12 times 2 is 24, minus 1.5 is 22.5 inches. And if I mark my fabric at 22.5 inches and attach it to my shutter at those intervals, so there'll be one attached here, and the next, to form the pocket, we just attach it to the next slat, and then the next slat, and so on and so forth. It'll be just the right size for 12 by 12 paper. So if you are never going to use 12 by 12 paper and you prefer a different size, all you need to do is multiply the depth of your paper. So that's the depth is the part that's going to go into the slat by 2 and subtract 1.5 inches. So for example, if you want to do 8.5 by 11 paper in your paper shutter, then you'll do 8.5 times 2 is 17 minus 1.5 is 15.5 inches. Okay, so now we measure. And what I did was made it also easier on myself when I did this by making a kind of template. So we know we want it to be 22.5 inches. So what we're going to do is at the very top, we're going to start with 1 inch down, because we need a little extra fabric just to start the process, right? So I'm going to mark 1 inch down, just like this. So there's 3 marks here because I'm going to put 3 staples in. If you want, you can just draw a line, whatever works for you. And now let's measure 22.5 inches down from that point. That brings us to right here. And then we just repeat this process for all of our material. Right, and I mentioned I made a template. What I did was I took off a smaller piece. This is from my first project. And I marked it so that all I had to do was then just lay it on top to get, you know, the next piece. You could make a paper template. You could count polka dots. Though I don't recommend that. I started out doing that and that took way too long. Just make yourself a template so that you can just lay it on top and then just go to town. I think that's best. So let me mark up all of this and I will see you when it's all marked up. All right, so I have marked enough to show you now how this is going to work. So what you want to do is you're going to start at the very top, attaching this. Just before you begin, just make absolutely sure that you have your shutter in the right position. So right now, the slats are kind of pointed in this direction. This is what we want. This direction, this side here, this is the side you're going to slide your paper in. If it's confusing you, get a piece of paper, slide it in, right? Turn it over, and then you'll know that you're using the side that you want. You want your fabric pockets going on this side of your shutter, right? Okay. So what we're going to do is we have marked off our blue spots, and we're going to put them onto our very top shutter. Now, I like to put the staples right in the bottom of the slat because I think that's the most stable position and is also where it's less likely to show on the other side. Now, for my staple, I'm actually using fairly narrow, shallow depth staples. I'm using 1/4 inch staples, and I started out using a manual staple gun. So let's move this to make sure that you can see it. Okay, that's centered. Okay, so what you want to do is just sort of, you're going to actually kind of put it like this because you actually want it to go right in to the bottom, right? So you're going to just hold it right up to there and use the shutter to kind of brace it against, and there we go, right in there. Same thing down here. And once in the middle. So it's right here in the very bottom of the shutter, and it's not going to stick out on the other side. So it's right here, here, and here. So if we turn it over, there's no staples sticking out here. Okay? So what we do next is we slide up our material just like this. We move that up. So we got this fabric here is, folded up. We find our next set of marks, which are right here, and we do exactly the same thing. We just come along and we staple. Same thing, you put your staple gun right, oops, that's gonna cause an issue. Right there, and just make sure it stays lined up. And one right here, and one right here. There we go. Now make sure you test it, because if you got it wrong, this is the time to find out. So that's exactly what we're going to do. So right here you can see we have a pocket. Let's get rid of our extra threads that we don't need to have. Nice, neat little pocket, right? See that? Okay, so let's give it a test. Here's our paper. Should slide in right here. Make sure I'm putting in the right one. And gravity is not helping me there. Okay, so we need to put this down so we can make sure that it's the right depth. That looks pretty good to me. What do you think? So this is what it looks like on the back side. So you're just holding right there. So we just continue now all the way down. Okay, so let's take out this paper. Let's get in our way. We don't need that right now. And we keep stapling. So all we do is we just slide it up to the next spot, just like this. And staple. If you find you don't have the hand strength for a manual staple gun, you can use a electric staple gun. My guy got this because he loves toys, and it was only like 25 bucks. So you could totally do this. However, I actually prefer the manual one. I don't know. I like power tools, but this one was working just fine for me. But I know not everybody has the hand strength for it. So feel free to use an electric staple gun. Just make sure you're using like 1/4 inch staples, because you really don't want your staples either showing on the other side, or what might be worse, of course, is hindering the paper going in and out. We don't want that. So when you get to the end of your strip of fabric, you'll notice that, here's the end, but we still have quite a bit more to go. So what we're going to want to do is cut just a 1/2 inch right below the last set of staples that we did, right? So we're just going to cut that out. Here we go, and just get rid of that. We don't need that. And what we want now is our next piece, our next strip. We're just going to take that right here, and we're going to place it right on the same slat that we just ended with. Don't go to the next slat down like you've been doing. Stay at that same slat, and you're going to want to staple it to the same slat. Just make sure you don't staple on top of the staples that you just did. So just feel for them with your fingers and just slide a bit to the either side. And then just staple that right in there. If they're not going in, that usually means that you're a little bit too high. There we go. Okay, and then you just keep going, just like you have been. And you continue with the second strip until you get all the way down to the last 12 inches of your shutter. When you get to the last 12 inches, or I mean, if you're using 8.5 by 11 paper, it would be the last 9 inches. Either way, at that point, you want to stop measuring it out in this nice uniform way that you've been doing it. And instead, you're going to start making your pockets shorter so that they don't extend beyond the bottom of your shutter. So if you look at this one, you can see that these are all about the same, these are all, but once we get down to here, while it looks like they're all about the same size in the back, obviously these are holding less paper, right? Because its shutter is like this shutter entrance is right here, whereas this shutter entrance is way up here, right? So when you get down here, you're just going to want to try to avoid making your fabric pocket too long, because you don't want it to hang down below your shutter, because that's going to look funny. It's going to look like your slip is showing. And it's not going to it's going to be difficult, because the thing is, this is not really something that you're going to mount on a wall, the way that you would a normal shutter. What you're probably going to do is lean it up against something, just like I'm doing right here, right? I'm just leaning it up against it, and it works perfectly. I mean, there are some other ways that you could probably mount it to something with a hinge, which is actually my plan, but that's a whole nother project that you'll just have to wait for. But either way, you don't want the bottom pockets extending below the shutter. So let's keep going and get down to our last 12 inches. So basically, you just keep going until you get to the bottom, and that is pretty much all there is to it. So let's take a closer look at the finished one. So here it is, and it's really pretty awesome the way that the slats just go right in here, and the paper is just held in place. Now let me show you the tip for making a pocket shorter if you decide that whatever you want to put in is shorter than what you plan to. So here at the back, you'll notice that there is a safety pin. So the way that this works, let's flip this paper up here, is that let's say we wanted this pocket to be shorter. Let's take these pages out so they're not in our way. All right, so we'll flip this up. We want this third pocket to be a little shorter for, let's say, 8.5 by 11 paper. So all we do is we put our paper in here at the size we want it to be. Let's say we want it to be right about there, and you'll look at it from the front, right? And then you just move your paper clip so it's right there, for example. And then if you do this, you can store any size paper that you want into your paper storage thing without worrying about whether you made the pocket the right size, right? So this makes it super flexible. You probably will want to put maybe, safety pin here and here, but otherwise you have total flexibility really over the size of your pockets. The only place where you don't really have flexibility is at the bottom. So let's take a look at that. So here at the bottom, as I mentioned, we needed to make the pocket shorter so that they didn't spill out the bottom, right? So these ones here in the very bottom are really small. And if you turn this over, you can see what I mean. I've just sort of tucked some little scraps of paper in here, right? You could use these for exactly what I did, scraps of paper, or whatever else, or nothing at all, right? You might even be able to use this as tool storage instead if you wanted. So these pockets in this section are pretty shallow, but The whole rest of it is going to be able to store, goodness, I think there's like 40 slats. And in my shutter, which has really tightly spaced slats, really narrow, right, I can get 10 sheets of paper in here. But if you're using a bigger shutter or one that has like louvered slats so they can open up more, you can actually get entire pads of paper in here. So if you're out shopping for a shutter at your local thrift store or antique store and you want to be able to hold more paper, definitely look for ones that have wider space slats or can open a little wider. And that is my tutorial. I hope that you enjoyed it. I think that this is such a fun, colorful solution to storing and displaying our beautiful paper. And really, when you have all of your things out like this, where you can see them and access them whenever you need to, you're going to be that much more likely to craft, that much more likely to get things done, and that much more likely to enjoy your time. So thank you so much for joining me. I look forward to our next video together.